Should the Detroit Pistons trade away Cade Cunningham? So far early on into the season, the Detroit Pistons have been by far the worst team in the NBA. After having a 2-1 record after 3 games, the Pistons have not won a game since. And although you definitely would like to keep some of your better players on your roster when you're rebuilding, at the same time, when you look at some of the players they have outside Cade Cunningham, it's pretty clear that there's not much talent there. And many at this point are questioning whether or not it would be the right move for the Pistons to move on from Cade and get a ton of assets in return for him and just completely start over. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports. I make opinionated NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. Cade Cunningham was drafted with the #1 overall selection during the 2021 NBA draft by the Detroit Pistons. And originally when Cade was coming into the NBA, there was a lot of hype and excitement around this guy. He was seen as a point guard that had great size out there and had a lot of different ability. Whether you talk about his individual scoring ability or his passing and playmaking ability, there was definitely a lot there for the Pistons to work with. And originally when Cade came into the NBA, he was living up to expectations, as in his rookie season he averaged 17 points per game on 5.5 boards and 5.6 assists. And when you look at those numbers, they're impressive numbers for anybody, but especially for a guy that was in his rookie season. And even besides the statistics, when you watched Cade out there, it was pretty clear that he had the capability to do a lot of different things, and there definitely was a ton of potential going forward for him. Cade was doing a really nice job at scoring for himself, whether you talk about driving all the way to the basket or from that mid-range area as well, and at times from that 3-point range. But besides that, he had a really nice understanding of how to run the pick and roll offense, how to run the pick and pop offense, and just facilitate for his teammates out there. And after his rookie season, there definitely was a lot to love about Cade's game. Although there were certain games and certain stretches where Cade did struggle a little bit, for the most part, he was showing a lot of what he could potentially be in the future. And after his rookie year, in his second season, in the few games that he did end up playing in, he did play very well, as he ended up averaging 20 points per game on 6.2 boards and 6 assists, which is definitely an improvement across the board for Cade. But unfortunately, the only problem was he ended up only playing 12 games that season, as Cade ended up going down with a significant injury. And whenever you have your star player go down with a significant injury, essentially keeping them out for the entirety of the season, it's always a concern. But especially when that guy is a younger player, it's even that much more of a concern, because a lot of times when you see younger players getting injured significantly, a lot of times those injuries could end up lingering throughout the rest of their NBA careers. We see it all the time, so it definitely was a concern with Cade. But so far in his 3rd season, which is this year, we haven't really seen the effects of that injury for the most part. And this season, Cade is definitely playing the best basketball of his career, as he's averaging 22 points per game on 4 boards and 7.1 assists. In terms of what Cade is doing out there individually, it's pretty clear that he just looks a little bit more comfortable and confident out there than he did in the past. Now, originally when Cade was coming into the NBA, he looked extremely good, extremely poised, and extremely talented, but at this point we're just seeing a little bit more refinement to his overall game. But a question that some of you may be having at this point is, why do I think the Pistons should potentially trade away this guy if he's playing so well and if he's showing so much promise? Well, in my opinion, I think it comes down to a couple of different factors, but the first factor that I want to touch upon is how the Pistons are playing overall. Because when you look at this Pistons roster, it is pretty clear that they're still in the rebuild process. They have a lot of younger guys on the roster, but at the same time, a lot of those guys are not living up to expectations, and although the Pistons are in the rebuild process still, they're definitely playing significantly worse than anybody really expected. They only have 2 wins on the season, and they're on a ridiculously long losing streak. And even if you watch their games out there, they're not even all that close to getting wins either. But basically the point that I'm trying to make is I think the Pistons are too bad at this point to keep Cade Cunningham. And that might sound weird because a lot of times when teams are rebuilding and a lot of times when teams bring in their franchise player through the draft, they're still not going to be a good team, and of course that 100% is true. But when you look at this Pistons roster, I think there's too many things that need to change in order for them to make significant changes to get better out there. Because when you look at what Cade is doing this season, he's actually playing the best basketball of his career. He recently had a 40+ point performance performance. He's doing a really nice job at being consistent out there, scoring for himself at a high level, facilitating for others, but at the same time, it seems like no matter what Cade individually is able to do, the Pistons are still not able to win. And basically what that tells you more so than anything else is that the Pistons just don't have the talent and firepower that's required to have any sort of potential going forward. And when you look at the Pistons roster at this point, it's difficult to see where they even improve from where they are now. Because a lot of the guys they have on the roster, although they are younger players and you would expect them to make improvements, overall a lot of them are just not living up to expectations at this point, and that causes a couple of problems. Obviously the first and most obvious problem is they're not playing well enough out there, and there is a question about their potential success in the future. But even besides that, if the Pistons wanted to trade away some of these guys, their trade value is obviously going to be significantly lower, and it's going to be that much more difficult for the Pistons to trade these guys away in order to bring significant talent in return. So if the Pistons currently at this point don't have the talent required in order to have any sort of potential success in the future, and they also don't have enough pieces to trade away in order to bring in some more significant talent, it's going to be very difficult for them to have any sort of potential going forward. And also on top of those factors, it's going to be a very difficult sell to bring in really anybody of significance to come into Detroit, especially when you consider the lack of success that they've shown this season, and if a lot of the players they have on the roster aren't all that talented and don't have all that much potential, it's just going to be a very difficult sell. So that's two different aspects of how organizations improve the Pistons really won't have access to essentially. Now I will say the Pistons do have draft picks, and of course they're probably going to have some high draft picks due to the way they've been playing, but I just think it's difficult to assume that the Pistons are going to make the right draft selections, and the players that they do draft, even if they are the right selections, are going to play well right away. So although I don't typically think it's the right decision to trade away your best player on a rebuilding organization, I think specifically with this Pistons team, I do think there is somewhat of an argument to be made. Because I think what the Pistons should do at this point is completely change everything within their organization. Find a new general manager, find a new head coach, find a new president of basketball operations, just make a bunch of different hirings before they do anything, and then at that point maybe I would consider trading away Cade Cunningham. Because if you do move on from Cade, you're going to get a ton in return. This guy is an extremely talented young point guard, and as I mentioned in previous videos, point guards are seen as one of, if not the most important positions in the league. And if you're able to get a guy who's shown a ton of promise but is still on his rookie deal and obviously is still a young player, that's a guy who's seen as an extremely valuable asset. So the Pistons would definitely be able to get a ton in return for Cade in terms of draft picks, alongside with some nice young players as well probably. And if the Pistons are able to bring in a ton of assets in return for this guy and basically just start fresh, I don't necessarily think it's the worst idea in the world. Now, will the Pistons actually go through with this? I don't currently think so. I think they're probably going to hold on to Cade, but at the same time, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to build any sort of success in the long-term future as well. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for the Pistons in the future. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Pistons should move on from Cade Cunningham, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.